was going to give the whole interview with this picture. What do you think, Bill? Yeah, I'm Mike Withey from Seattle. I'm a former president of Trial Lawyers for Public Justice. This was in the mid 80s, and I joined Schrader, Goldmark, and Bender, and Len Schrader was just an absolute inspiration to me. And he invited me to come to the Seattle convention. It was of the ATLA at the time, Association of Trial Lawyers of America. And there was public justice meetings associated with that. And he gave a presentation called Cutting Through the Bullshit. And I just thought it was brilliant the way he was able to dissect how corporate America robs people of their rights, really destroys consumers' ability to be healthy and safe. And, Len said, this is an organization that you should be involved in. And it wasn't just because my senior partner told me to join something. It really attracted me because to me, it reflected the conscience of the trial bar, is the way one of the people put it, that this was the people who wanted to do right and do justice. And that's why I decided I wanted to join Trial Lawyers for Public Justice, Len Schrader. I did. I understood Ralph was involved in its creation, but the people that, to me, kind of showed the beginnings were Joan Claybrook and Tony Roisman, who was then the executive director. They hired Arthur Bryan, I think, as their first staff lawyer, and he was fantastic. So between the three of them, more than Ralph, they gave me a lot of inspiration, a lot of leadership and direction, and encouraged me to join the board eventually. Yeah, I did eventually. I mean, that when I became a board member, I think it was in 1988. By that time, I understood that we were taking cases that the private bar wasn't taking. And that was in part because we didn't want to compete with them. And the people at ATLA who didn't like TLPJ were upset because they were concerned that there was some other trial lawyer group that would speak for the trial bar. So I understood that we weren't going to lobby. We weren't going to have anything to do with the politics. We just were filing cases and quote unquote sue the bastards. So that was about as deep as I got. Sue the wrongdoers, sue corporate America, and basically do the cases that the trial bar wasn't going to make any money off of. So we knew going in that we took a case, we didn't expect to make money. We were willing to advance costs on the case if we could, but we got trial lawyers that would be willing to do cases that were outside the normal realm of the trial bar. We didn't do any, rear enders or, cases that everybody else was doing a good job on. But also there was cases that were precedent setting. We were trying to create a kind of a corpus juris for public justice. We were trying to create a body of law through the cases that we brought that would bring relief to the consumers. This was in the era of Reagan. This was the era, even later, of Dan Quayle's, Council on Competitiveness. So we were up against the tort deformers and the insurance industry and corporate America trying to throttle the trial bar, in its cradle. And TLPJ was an answer to that. TLPJ stood for something, and that was civil justice, access to justice. And that's what Len Schrader taught me, and that's why I wanted to be a member. Well, for years we didn't. Well, no, but, we had the Woburn case, which was the Massachusetts water contamination case that became a movie, Civil Action. We had Comanche Peak was another pollution case. We had, going in, we were trying to develop an environmental law project, as I recall. That was way before Jim Hecker joined, who's absolutely fabulous. But yeah, but the people that were doing the cases were the board members. They were the trial lawyers. And, we had one staff person. Well, Arthur couldn't do everything. And Tony Roisman, for sure, wasn't going to be filing cases all over the country. He had the organization to run. So it really, in the beginning, it was dependent upon the members of the board to do the work. And in terms of the litigation. I remember Len was an original founder. I think there won more than 200, Bill. I just don't think, it was just a really small group. But that we were dedicated. Of course, everybody put up their money on the belief that that's all they'd ever have to commit. And that went out the window really quickly. Yeah, I remember the New Orleans convention. And I remember Joan, we had some fun that convention. I'll put it this way. Joan and I were able to sneak away and go gambling down on the riverfront, and we had some parties, but mainly it was some good education about what the organization was doing. And in fact, we brought the case Domingo versus Marcos. We brought that case. I brought that case to the TLPJ to have it help out on discovery against the U.S., which was going on at the time I joined the board. So we were very grateful to the organization for the support it gave to the estates of Domingo and Veritas in winning the case against Ferdinand Marcos. What I remember was the incredible ability, and you manifested this a lot, of understanding the science in any case. That was true of the Woburn case. Tony Roisman was right on the science of everything, really, pretty much. And the value of having great scientific experts, of people that did water contamination and chemical analysis and all those kinds of things. I think that ended up being kind of a tribute and a trademark, I should say, of the TLPJ board. But yeah, they were very impressive lawyers in that group. Well, that's what happened. Was we were kind of the young Turks. It was us and what we call graybeards, which I happen to have now. But the young Turks were Jeff Foote, you, me, I think Macon Coles, Larry Trattler. It was and we were a group. Larry, well, yeah. In fact, we were kind of treated sometimes with some disdain by the older members, because I think they thought maybe we wanted to be in leadership rather than the guys who had founded the organization, the older, and they were almost all guys. So when Jeff Foote first became president, which was in 1990, I think, 91. That was the first time a young Turk like us was made president, and it was a good transition, because it reflected, well, we need young blood in this organization. We need younger lawyers, but we also need to have the experience of people like Gene Pavilon and Bill Sneed and Bill Trine. They became presidents, and they did a great job. But we wanted to get some leadership positions ourselves, and the organization was open to it, and that's an important part of TLPJ, was it was open to new leadership, and I think that still applies today. Well, the first case I got deeply involved with was the Avergon case, which was the Iran-Contra case that we brought on behalf of journalists that were injured by the Contras that were fighting the war in Nicaragua. And of course, this became, they were the Contras had bombed an airport, and Tony, our client, had flown in on it. And one of the major things in that case was we got board members, probably as many as 15 of us, working together as a legal team to take the depositions of, the leadership of that the Iran-Contra fiasco, which was Oliver North and Hakeem and General Secor. And I got to take the deposition of the head national security advisor of Vice President George Bush, a guy named Donald Gregg, who used to be in the CIA. We worked tirelessly for like 18 months. The case eventually was dismissed. And it was unfortunate, because, I thought we had a great case, but the way the board members came together to work on that case together was fantastic. It was like a law firm. And that to me was a real signal case, because, more recently, the board hasn't been involved in as much in cases like that. The board members don't kind of all get together and let's bring a lawsuit and let's work together on it, which is unfortunate. Another case that was really important financially was the polybutylene pipe case. And this was a huge class action. It was a $900 million settlement. And there was a big issue whether we should take a case, because this was a case that was actually going to make money. And it did make millions of dollars of fees for the TLPJ, the law firm. But it was a very close vote in the executive committee whether we should take it. And I voted for it because I thought it was a model for how you do class action settlements. And, I think that stood the test of time. Another case, of course, was the Exxon Valdez oil spill case that you worked on, Bill, and Macon worked on. Because I think we decided to take that case in Chicago, and one of our past presidents, Leonard Ring, had decided he was going to speak in favor of us taking it. And he gave a speech, and then he thanked you, Larry. There's a standing joke that the older guys in the organization couldn't remember our names, so all of us were Larry. I think Jeff Foote first got called Larry because he had a friend and a member, Larry Wobrock. But at any rate, Leonard Ring said, "Well, Larry, I think we should take this case because who else speaks for the bunnies up there?" And the room just didn't know whether to crack up or just say, "Yeah, okay, he's in favor of it. Let's don't say anything." That we're not saving bunnies, we're saving the environment land. But at any rate, that was a big turning point that we represented the National Wildlife Federation in that case. So, my basic point is that was when board members were actively involved in litigation in a major way, and I'm not sure that's still true, and that's a shame to me. I'm trying to remember. There was in the beginning, we kind of got our feet wet, not only in environmental cases, Woburn, but on Title IX. And Arthur Bryant was an expert in this and brought one of the first suits against Brown University. And to me, that really put us on the map, not only in women's athletic programs, but in the public interest law community. Because we were the upstarts. We weren't the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. We weren't Sierra Club Legal, we weren't doing the work that many of the great organizations now legal, the National Organization of Women. We were kind of new upstarts and trial lawyers. But I think the Title IX cases really brought us a lot of great attention and credibility for the excellent work that we did on that, including Arthur's work and many others. Adele and Leslie and all the staff there did a great job on those cases. So, I'm very proud of all the cases we did, including the Domingo case. But I think the organization went through a lot of growing pains that weren't related to the cases we did, including the name change, including, kind of who got on the board, including what the purpose of the board was. So, I have some thoughts on that. See, I think, when I was president, 1990, what is it, five or six, we had basically raised enough money to get out of poverty. We were able to hire some staff people and we were able to do some major cases. But I thought the future of the organization lay in the state captains and the state coordinators, and we wanted to create TLPJ on a statewide level that would have the same role that TLPJ nationally played with ATLA. We would support the trial community, but we would take cases they didn't take, and then that actually it was partly successful, but it didn't really happen. The name change came about because the forces of tort reform were doing everything they can to plaster trial lawyers' frivolous lawsuits and equating the lack of competitiveness, supposedly, of the U.S. capitalist system to the fact these trial lawyers were messing everything up. So that was a huge dispute. And unfortunately, a number of our leading members left the organization when we changed the name to Public Justice Foundation. I supported the name change because what's in a name? I got my TLPJ shirt on today because I believe that was a great organization when it was founded, and it still is. But there was a lot of hard feelings about that name change, and we went through a lot of turmoil. But we survived it and came out, I think, better at the end of the process. Oh my God, that was the darkest moment. Jeff Foote and Susan Salinoff and I went down to Bend, Oregon to visit Arthur, who was in a coma. I mean, he stayed in a coma for a long time, right after he was injured. And we tried to help him, Nancy, and Wally. But and Paul Stripmatter my partner, played an amazing role in trying to pick up the pieces from where Arthur had left us. And Paul Stripmatter was president. I was past president. Jeff and I were past presidents, but Jeff lived in Oregon and I lived in Seattle. So we flew into Bend and just spent about 3 days down there trying to console Arthur's mom and dad and everybody. Nancy was, it was just a horrible accident. But the organization just, realized that, we had to move on, and we did a tribute to Arthur, and Arthur came back and as strong as could be, and He still has, the brain injury, he still has the physical limitations, but he's a fighter. Amazing human being, Arthur Bryant. You're bringing back some very sad memories for me when I was in that hospital room, looking at Arthur fighting for his life. And it was sad, but the organization, lived on. Out of that long range planning committee, Len helped create a committee we call the Outrage Committee. If Len and the notion was, if you read something in the newspaper and you're a board member of TLPJ and you're outraged by it, then let's see if we can create a case out of it. Let's see if there's a case there. And that was the board members' responsibility. We didn't like the fact that all we were being asked to do was raise money or being on a committee and rubber stamp the decisions of staff. We wanted to be involved in litigation, as we had with the Iran-Contra. And so we called it the Outrage Committee, but it actually became formalized. And I was honored to be the first chair of the Case Development Committee. And we would just try to find cases, and board members would come out of left field sometimes and say, hey, how about this case or that case? And a lot of good cases came out of that. And I don't know that that's true anymore. I love Joan Claybrook. Sandra Robinson's another one, another fighter. Gerson Smoger. I mean, these are people still active in the organization that really have carried it through for many, many years. Well, I'm delighted that public justice is so active in the litigation field. We've got the best financial, foundation that we've ever had. We've got cases, we've got enormous staff, and that are just so talented. And credit to Paul Bland and Jim Hecker, unbelievably great people. My only concern, and I've raised this on occasion, is that we can't forget why we got started. We can't forget the reason for our existence. And it isn't just to, put on great galas and have Trial Lawyer of the Year awards and have all of the way that we are inspirational. That's very important. But we got to keep suing the bastards, because there's nothing going on in this country from the right wing and from corporate America that's good. And so let's make sure we don't, kind of revel in our success and forget the origins that started us. And that's the fight for social justice and access to justice.